Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Managed Instance Link, and this is a new feature that I am just really excited for, as I know that this new feature is really going to simplify some common tasks that I have to do far too often. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So first off, guys, what is Managed Instance Link? So not to oversimplify things, but Managed Instance Link is just an easy mechanism to replicate SQL Server databases to Azure SQL Managed Instance. And the good thing is that to set up the Managed Instance Link, it is really so easy. There's no need for you to have to set up a publisher for it, a distribution for it. You don't have to worry about setting up any type of log agents for it. No, you can just go through a easy wizard for it, and with just a few clicks, you can be up and running. Managed Instance Link is built on top of the always-on technology that was released with the SQL Server 2016 version. The Managed Instance Link will create a distributed always-on availability group, and it will utilize that to establish a one-to-one connection between your source SQL Server database and your target Azure SQL Managed Instance database. Managed Instance Link can be configured to work with a SQL Server source system that is just a single node system with no availability groups currently, or it can be set to work with a multi-node system that has many availability groups created. Your SQL Server source systems can reside anywhere. So they can be on premise, they can be inside of Azure maybe they're inside of AWS, a co-location, whatever the case may be. You can utilize the Managed Instance Link feature with your database. So why does the Managed Instance Link feature really excite me? Well, because there are just so many different use cases for how you can utilize this type of technology. So let's kind of talk about some of those use cases right now. So the first use case that you can use Managed Instance Link for is to simply offload some of your read-only workloads. Suppose you manage a retail shop and you have a on-premise SQL Server system that powers your retail transactions that you have. And now you have been tasked to create some reports for upper management. Well, you don't want those actual reports to bog down the transactional system. So you can easily use Managed Instance Link to replicate your data to Azure SQL Managed Instance, and then you can run your reports from that replicated data. The great thing is, now that your data is inside of Azure now, you can actually utilize that replicated data for many different use cases now. So we already talked about how you can kind of utilize that data for your reporting purposes, but maybe now you might want to utilize that data for machine learning processes, maybe for some type of artificial intelligence. I mean, there are all sorts of different things, but now you have this replicated data inside of the Azure cloud. So the limits are really limitless. You can use this data as you see fit. The second use case is that you can utilize Managed Instance Link to consolidate or deconsolidate your workloads. So maybe on premise, you have multiple SQL Server instances there, and you need a way for you to combine them all into one Azure SQL Managed Instance. Well, you can utilize this feature to actually accomplish that, or vice versa. Maybe on premise, you have one really large SQL Server instance, and you're looking for a way that you can kind of break that down so that you can have multiple smaller Azure SQL Managed Instances. Well, you can utilize this feature to accomplish both of those two use cases. The third use case, and this is the one that just really excites me personally, but you can utilize the Managed Instance Link as part of your migration strategy. Over the years, I have worked on many migrations, and I've done things from using the backup and restore processes. I've used replication for it. I've used log shipping, all sorts of different things. And by far, using Managed Instance Link is the easiest and most efficient way for you to do an online migration of your data. And from this point onward now, using Managed Instance Link is going to be the preferred way of doing a online migration from SQL Server sources to Azure SQL Managed Instance. Lastly, you can use the Managed Instance Link feature to replicate your data to Azure SQL Managed Instance so that you have your data readily available in the event that your on-premise location goes offline. In the event that your on-premises data site is offline, you can easily fail your workloads over to Azure, and then you can start to work with your replicated data that is now inside of the Azure SQL Managed Instance. One thing to note here is that if your SQL Server system is running the 2016 version or the 2019 version, once you fail your workloads over, that will break the actual managed instance link. So in that particular use case, once your on-premise environment is back online, you cannot move your workloads back online at that point. That link has been broken, so your workloads will need to remain inside of Azure. Now, if you are utilizing the 2022 version of the SQL Server product, you can actually move your workloads back to on-premise once whatever issue you had is resolved there. So just kind of note that the 2022 version is the only one that will allow you to move your workloads to Azure and then move your workloads back to on-premise. I know. You guys have heard all of these different great things that makes managed instance links so great. And so you're just ready right now to run out and build your own. But one quick second, there are some key things that we need to make sure are in place first before we start to build out our managed instance link. So let's kind of talk about some of those things right now. So the first thing that you need to ensure is that you are running on a supported version of the SQL Server product. So we kind of talked about the fact that Managed Instance Link is built on top of the always-on technology that was released as part of the 2016 version of the SQL Server product. So naturally, anything that is older than the 2016 version is unsupported. Now, anything that is 2016 or later should work just fine with Managed Instance Link. However, there is one caveat here. If you are utilizing the 2017 version of the SQL Server product, unfortunately, you do not get to come to this party. So the 2017 version is unsupported for Managed Instance Link. Number two, you need to ensure that your SQL Server source system and your Azure SQL Managed Instance can communicate over a private network. And we will touch on this one just a little bit more later on. Number three, the databases that you plan to use for Managed Instance Link need to be in the full recovery mode, and they need to have a full backup in place. Number four, the easiest way for you to utilize Managed Instance Link is to use the wizard that was built for it. So the only way that you can utilize the wizard is that you have to be utilizing SQL Server Management Studio version 19 or higher. And lastly, in number five, you need to ensure that you go out to your source SQL Server system and go to Configuration Manager and enable the always on availability groups feature. On the last slide, we kind of talked about how your source SQL Server system needs to be able to communicate to Azure SQL Managed Instance over a private network. So let's kind of touch on that just a little bit more. In the event that your SQL Server system is running anywhere outside of Azure, that could be something running on premise somewhere, a co-location, AWS, anywhere else outside of Azure, you're going to need to make sure that you have some type of private communication in place to actually talk with Azure. You would need to configure a site-to-site VPN, or you can utilize ExpressRoute. In the event that your SQL Server system is running inside of an Azure VM, all you have to do is ensure that the VNet that is hosting your SQL Server machine can communicate with the VNet that is hosting the Azure SQL Managed Instance. To set that up, you can simply peer the two VNets together. Once that private communication channel is in place, then your source system and the target system will communicate using a certificate-based trust process. And basically what they will do is they will each exchange their public keys with each other. All right, guys, so we've talked and talked and talked, and you guys can see how great that Managed Instance Link actually is. So hey, let's get to the fun part now. Let's go out and actually set some of these links up and let's see how they work. So today we're going to set up a managed instance link for one database that is inside of a SQL Server 2019 system, and we're going to set up a link for one database inside of a SQL Server 2022 instance. All right, guys, let's get to it.
All right, guys, so we are logged into Azure now. So the very first thing that I would like to do here is to just kind of walk you guys through my environment here so that you can see what type of resources we will be working with today. So the first thing that we have here is a Windows 11 box. So I'll be utilizing this to do most of our work here today. And then we have one SQL Server 2019 server and one SQL Server 2022 server. All of these resources here all reside on one VNet. And then we have a Bastion host, which I will utilize to connect out to each of my VM resources down here. All right, so let's get things going. So the first thing that I want to do is log into the SQL Server machines. So I have a connection here to the 2019 machine. And I'm just going to come down here to the Start menu. I'm going to look for the SQL Server tools, and I'm going to open up Configuration Manager. Once Configuration Manager starts up, I'm going to come over here to Services section, and then I'm just going to right click on the database engine, go to Properties, and then Always On Availability Groups, and then I just want to enable this. I'll get a warning message here that says that these changes will not take place until we restart the service. So that is okay. I'll click OK there. And then I'll go ahead and I will do a restart here. And while we kind of wait on that to restart, I will log in here to the SQL Server 2022 box, and I will just go through the same process here. SQL Server 2022, Configuration Manager. I am going to right click on the database engine service, go down to Properties, Always On Availability Groups. I'm going to enable this, apply. There's my warning message, okay. And then I'm just going to do a quick restart on the database service here. All right, so once these are actually restarted now, there's not anything else that we're going to need to do locally on these two boxes here. So for the rest of the time, I will be logged into my Windows 11 machine here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the SSMS tool. And real quick, just so you guys note, we are running on version 19 here. So remember that to use the Managed Instance Link wizard, we do have to be running on version 19 or greater. So I will close out of that, and I'm going to connect out to my SQL Server 2019 server. I'll just click on remember so I don't have to retype that again. Then I will also open up a connection to my SQL Server 2022 instance as well. Click remember once again. All right, so once we are logged in here, the only thing so far that I have done to these two instances here is create one database on each. We will see that we have a AdventureWorks 2019 database and a AdventureWorks 2022 database here. So I'm going to open up a new connection to each of these servers. And the first thing I want to do is I just want to verify once more that we do have the always on AG group feature enabled. So to do that, I will run this T-SQL statement here. And I will execute that, and I came back with a 1, which means that it is indeed enabled. So I will do the exact same thing here on my 2022 box. All right, so it looks like we are all good there. The next thing that we are going to need to do here is we need to create a master key that will be used for our encryption purposes. So I will run another T-SQL statement here. Create master key encryption by password, my strong password. We'll execute that. And looks like I left off my quotation mark. So I will run that. Everything is good there. And I will run the same thing against my 2019 server. All right, so we are all good there. The next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure that any of the databases that I plan to use for Managed Instance Link, I need to make sure that they are in the full recovery model and make sure that they have a full backup in place. So to verify that, I'll just right click and come down to the properties section. I'll come over to options and I will change this to full recovery model here. And then I will do the exact same thing for my 2022 database as well. Options, recovery model, full. All right, so that step is done. So now one of the last steps that we're going to need to do is make sure that we have a full backup in place here. So I'll just right click once again, go to tasks, and then we want to take a full backup here. So I will just go ahead and kick off that full backup. Everything is good there. I will repeat the process on the 2022 database as well. And that is done. All right, so at this point, most of our pre-steps are completed now. So I am going to, real quick, I'm going to open up a connection to my managed instance machine here. So I'll go to connect once again, put in the name for my managed instance and my password, and I will remember it. All right, so now we are logged into the managed instance here, and we can see that right now there are no databases here. So what we want to do now is to establish a link for each of my 2 AdventureWorks DBs here, and then we're going to replicate them over to my managed instance here. So I will start off with the 2019 box here, and I will just right click here, and as long as you guys are running on SSMS version 19 or greater, you will see this new section right here called Azure SQL Managed Instance Link. And within this, you have 2 options here. Option 1 is to replicate your database, and option 2 is to fail over your database. So we are going to go with option number 1 right here to replicate our database. So once the wizard here launches, the very first thing that you're going to get is a intro page here. And the intro page just kind of gives you a quick overview on what the feature is and some use cases for actually utilizing this feature. So we would just click on the next button here. The next page here is it is going to check for our requirements to make sure that they are all met. One thing that we note here is that we have 2 warning messages here. Microsoft recommends that anytime that we use Managed Instance Link, that we turn on 2 separate trace flags. Trace flag number 1 is going to be the 1800 flag. And basically what this flag is kind of meant to do is it's kind of meant to optimize your log files in the event that your primary replica and your secondary replicas don't have the same disk sector size. So in the event that they don't, this is just going to help you to kind of optimize things to improve your write processes. The next trace flag here is the 9567 flag. And basically what this flag is meant to do is it is going to enable compression on your data stream files as you start to replicate your data to the target instance. So The benefit of using this trace flag here is that if you are replicating over large databases, this will improve the transfer time during the seed process. The downside here is that this will have an impact to your compute. So in the event that you can tolerate an increase to your compute, then this is one trace flag that I would definitely recommend that you enable. So for our particular use case, since these are not enabled right now, I will just ignore these for right now. And then we will move on to the next screen. And then on the next screen here, we can choose our databases that we want to use for the managed instance link. So I'm going to choose my VentureWorks 2019 database. And then on the next page here is going to ask us to log into our Azure account so that we can access our managed instance here. So I will just log in here really quick. All right, so now that we are logged in, we can see down here that I can choose my actual resource group where my Azure SQL managed instance lives, and then I can choose the actual instance itself here. So I will just click on the next tab. And then on this next section here, it is going to allow us to configure our endpoints that will be utilized here and the certificate names that will be utilized to establish the trust session and to exchange the public keys. I will just leave everything as is, and then I will go to the next, and then we get a overview page so that we can review the changes here that will be taking place. And I will just click on the finish button here, and we will just wait here for a brief moment while everything configures. All right, so it looks like everything here completed without any kind of issue. So I can close this out now. And if we notice now under our always on HA folder here, we now have two availability groups. So I can right click on the first one here and then look at our dashboard, and you will notice that we now have one active AG group that is in the synchronous commit mode here. So everything here looks all good. So before we look at anything else, I will come down here to my 2022 database here, and I will go through the same process here once more. Requirement checks all good. I'll choose my database here. I will log into my managed instance. I'll just remember that once more. Then we get to the page where we can set up our endpoints and our certs. I will leave everything here as the default, and I will click next and then the finish button, and we will let this run through its process. All right, so once again, everything here is all good. So I will close this out. And then once again, we can view our dashboard here just to make sure that everything is online and operational and in sync. And it looks like everything is all good here. The synchronization state right now is that it is indeed in sync. So the next thing I will do here is actually come down to my managed instance here, and then I will just do a refresh here on the databases folder, and we will now see that my two databases has each been replicated to my managed instance here. And just to verify that our data here is here, I will just select from one table here. So let's just look at our employee table, select top 1,000 rows. And just like that, all of our data has been replicated over. So as you can see, utilizing managed instance link is a very quick and easy process, and it's a very efficient way to move your data from a SQL Server source to Azure SQL managed instance. Before you guys leave, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, guys, peace.